Welcome into the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show. We are here. If you know Football Guys content and being here, I'm sure that you do. You know our great guest that we have today. We have Sigmund Bloom coming in today, and Sig did some fantastic work where he built some big boards that are great for your rookie drafts. Tiered big boards that kind of walk you through where the tier breaks are going to be, how to look at those. And he did them in Superflex, did them in single quarterback, did them in IDP as well. And so if you're an IDP player, I don't know that we lean into enough IDP content, or we ever can lean into enough IDP content. I've, with the draft, everything involved in the draft, absolutely love talking about the defensive side of the ball as well. So we're going to touch a little bit of that today. But first off, I want to introduce my co-host. Everybody knows and loves Jagger May. Jagger, how are you doing today?
Great. I'm doing great. As you guys know, I'm the worst wide receiver ranker out there right now. Having fun. Happy we get to talk about Sig's rankings right now.
Yeah, no,
We'll
hey.
pause it. Welcome in, Sig. Yeah, go ahead, man. Welcome in.
Yeah, sometimes our job is to let people throw tomatoes at us, and that's okay.
Yep.
The dunk tank, the
Yeah.
good old dunk tank. When you're a fantasy football analyst, you're sitting in the dunk tank. You might not realize it until you end up wet, but you're always in the dunk tank. So that's okay. It's okay because it starts the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, the fun thing about putting rankings out there, and they're all wrong. I think that part of the
Yeah.
reason the fantasy football community can be tolerant, they can get the long knives out sometimes, but they're very tolerant because we all see, as the fantasy football season plays out, we're all very wrong about like 40% or more of whatever happens. So take your swing at the pinata. Try step up and try to win the teddy bear at your draft. And that's what's really fun about the rookie big boards, guys. And I got to give a nod to Clayton Gray, one of the true unsung heroes of football, guys. Clayton Gray and Keith Overton and Simon Shepard. I mean, so many people. I don't want to leave anybody out, but there's a lot of people that work really hard to make what we do possible. And these big boards, you're simulating being a GM. Isn't this why we started playing fantasy football in the first place? Right? It's pretend we were the GM. We have these resources. I'm trying to trade down. I'm trying to trade up in different drafts. I'm trying to look, and you look at the board and you look at the tiers, and the tiers give you that actionable instruction of, okay, the last player in a tier, maybe it's time to trade up. If there's 3 or 4 players left in a tier, maybe you can trade down. And then you can really play the draft, and that's one of the most fun parts. I mean, look, I started playing Dynasty fantasy football so I could have rookie picks and make rookie picks and see how they turn out on my team.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the real value in a tiered approach like this. And I'm a big believer in an approach like this because, yeah, you build your roadmap, your plan. If you get on it early, you can really kind of step into some of those tiers for a lot cheaper than you will when the draft room loads. But it's just a great approach if you allow draft pick trading in your redraft league, or if any league that any you might be in, if trading is involved in that. It's a great exercise to do, and so it's a great visualization to show people. And I think when you really look at it, I mean, singular rankings like what Jagger put out with wide receivers, or what we talked about previously, like that's the most granular level. Like I kind of almost bubble it up to a high level of, you've got players that matter, you've got players that could matter, and you got players that just don't matter. And I think that that's kind of the highest level of fantasy football and the easiest way to approach it.
Yep. And it's like, again, when you think about tiers, and especially when you talk in a format like this, not just underneath a graphic on the internet, with 240 characters, it's like, sure, CD Lamb's your wide receiver one. Like, yeah, that's great, man. Like, I don't disagree with you at all. Like, I have like minor preferences. And then even as we get into these rookies, it's like, you even have bigger tier breaks, I think. And it's easy to know where the value is and how you should be kind of moving.
All right, before we move on, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We have launched the new Dynasty Football channel, and so we're going to have all your Dynasty content coming out on this YouTube channel. Take a minute to like and subscribe. Take a minute to go over to the Audible channel as well. If you're not a subscriber there already, to like and subscribe to that channel as well. Sig is one of the leading faces on that Audible channel, but we're bringing you all kinds of content between all of those channels. So thank you so much, and please go do that.
Yeah, and make sure to go over to footballguys.com and subscribe there. We talk Dynasty here, but we have everything from IDP and its best ball season. And then leave us a comment if you disagree, if you think we're crazy. You guys are pretty good at that on Twitter. You guys can do that here too. So
Yeah, so we're gonna dive in here, and most have kind of developed a top 8 when it comes to super flex leagues. Sig, you've got a top 7. In your top 7, you've got Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, and Brock Bowers. And so there's obviously one name absent from that from most top 8s. People have put JJ McCarthy into that tier of their top 8s pretty universally. Uh, for you, not having JJ McCarthy in that tier, obviously there's things I like about his landing spot. Is that holding on to your pre-draft assessment of McCarthy? And then kind of, I wonder if your thoughts on how much you should change on a pre-draft assessment relative to new information coming into the draft or landing spots coming into the draft, those types of things.
Yeah. I'll take the second part first because I think that doing this now, the Bloom 100, I think this is the 19th year or so, 19 or 20. I lose count. The math gets fuzzy. Over the time I've done it, I've become more open to changing a player's ranking based on when and where they are drafted than I was at the beginning, where I was emphatic that talent determined everything. If you could get the talent right in your evaluation, you were going to solve the problem, the equation of what's that player's career going to look like. And then you watch it play out where you really absorb and size up the talent, but then you see whether it's because of a bad organization or the flip side of that, a good organization, or just very specifically how they're being used. Quentin Johnston's going to be a really interesting one to watch here with Lad McConkey mostly lining up in the slot because Quentin Johnston maybe is best cast as a big slot. You're asking him to learn on the job something that he didn't demonstrate he could do. So sometimes it's just a player being deployed in a way that doesn't match up with their strengths. You have changing coaching staffs. You have sometimes a player has to deal with too many coaching staffs, 3 or 4 during their rookie contract. We never get to see what they could do and so on. And landing spot is really important. And the thought experiment I've been using the past year to probe at this is like, just for a second, think about if the Panthers took CJ Stroud and you ended up with Bryce Young. What story are we talking about today? And everyone's going to have a different answer, and that's okay. But it forces you to grapple with the idea of how much is it the player's destiny and how much is it the destiny of the organization or the coaches or the people, the owner even. And with JJ McCarthy, yeah, it's a terrific spot. It's a fantastic landing spot. You did see that nobody was that hot and bothered to get him. Even the Vikings were maybe like bidding against themselves. Sean Payton gloated about deking them into having to trade up because they were going to be on Bo Nix all along. It makes you wonder, like, if the Vikings were able to trade up for Drake May, you're our guy. Except we tried to trade for this other guy and didn't get him, but you're our guy. Awkward a little bit. JJ McCarthy maybe would have fallen. Maybe the Patriots would have just taken him at 12, but maybe he would have fallen. Maybe he would have been that quarterback that falls on draft day. So some questions here that I think puts McCarthy in a different tier. What I'm really getting at here, guys, is that Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams have a much higher ceiling than any other quarterback in this draft. So there has to be a tier break between the two of them and the next set of quarterbacks. Maybe they're closer to Brock Bowers or Rome Odunze than the other players in the tier that aren't quarterbacks in a super flex league. But still, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, their ceiling just can't approach what Daniels and Caleb Williams can do for fantasy football. So more than that, Jeff, I think the tier break represents that more than any kind of worries about the landing spot. Although it definitely was not a draft that made me think, wow, the NFL was really, really excited about J.J. McCarthy. That was probably just Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, and it's my bad. You had 6 in that top tier because Drake May was outside of that as well. But I do think it's interesting because what we've seen recently, especially like Will Levis or a lot of the pre-draft talk about Malik Willis, it did seem like teams had become more willing to let those kind of second tier, third tier, even quarterback prospects fall down in the draft, grabbing blue chip players earlier. This felt like a throwback draft. This felt like when we saw Jake Locker and Blaine Gabbert, and we had all these guys landing, and like that 11th pick to the Jaguars every year. It seemed like the Jaguars would take a new quarterback at 11th overall every other year, and so it kind of reminded me of like that type of draft that we used to see.
Yeah, and an interesting point that you made, Sig, and my only big disagreement is I think Drake May still in tier one of the quarterbacks, but I've started telling like kind of describing my process is I draft coaching staffs or offensive coordinators as much as I draft a player. That like, yes, I can really like a player and that matters, but you know, if someone has Sean McVay and then someone has I don't know, like who's Jeff Fisher, you know, like if
Nathaniel
Jeff
Hackett.
Fisher's yeah, Nathaniel Hackett or something like that. Like, and a lot of people like it. I think that's becoming more common now, but especially with a lot of guys who rely on data or whatnot, that's something that we lack as like in the like the fantasy space is an understanding of what these coaches are and how they utilize players. Because that's like people ask, well, why do you have this player ranked so high? It's like I know exactly how this particular coaching staff is going to use him. I see a role. Or on the flip side, with like someone else, I was like, I don't know what they're doing here. Like the Packers. It's like I love all these players, but I don't know how they're going to be deployed yet. And I've never seen this iteration of the Packers that haven't had Rodgers. So I really don't know what we're going to see. So it's like I can't rank them that high or I can't draft them that high, but I somehow want all the pieces. And that's a weird feeling to be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that the point you're bringing up, and Matt Waldman, I don't, I, I rarely make it through a show without mentioning Matt Waldman, football guy's
Mhm.
colleague, the sagacious one. You get to the mountaintop, and that's who's there waiting for you, Matt Waldman. He always, guys, would talk about workplaces, right? I mean, we can all relate to this. Right? We've all been parts of many workplaces in our life, and we've been parts of bad workplaces. And you can reflect on how in bad workplaces people weren't going to hit their potential, and people weren't going to flourish. They weren't going to their talents weren't going to be lined up with what they can really contribute, and it was just going to be frustration. And you can then look at that and apply that to the 32 NFL franchises. Alternatively, you can think about good workplaces. Hopefully you can think about good workplaces you've been part of and how that really helped you flourish and grow as a person or whatever it was that you were contributing there. And again, we're GMs, right? At this point in the dynasty calendar, we are straight up GMs, and we're just trying to take this nebulous asset of draft capital and do it what we can with it to help our little franchise the best we can. And like you're saying, Jagger, who are you trusting to develop your players? It's like you have
Yep.
32 potential player development operations to go with. Who are you trusting? And that can sometimes, and maybe should, overshadow the player. I don't even need to know anything about the player. If the Lions drafted him, I'm paying attention. Kyron Williams is a great example. Lots of models knocked him out for any number of reasons, but it's the Rams that are deploying and developing him. They tend to get the best out of their players on offense. And then there's backwards organizations that you feel like, well, geez, they're going to mess up anything. Like poor Garrett Wilson and what he's had. And yet, Garrett Wilson from a dynasty standpoint represents he's still going to hold his value. So this is like Malik Neighbors, Just know that no matter how bad it is from Malik Neighbors, 3 years from now, people will still see him as a top 15 overall player in redraft leagues and an untouchable asset. So that's good in a way, but it also reminds you, like, what has Garrett Wilson actually done for fantasy teams so far? Year 3, that's not great. And that's because Jets. So always remember that the franchise.
Yep.
And I think that's you talk about the Rams there. That's a great example talking about there's so much questions about who's going to be the next Puka Nakua and well, look at good coaching staffs and opportunities. And previous to that, Amon-Ra St. Brown coming out as a day 3 wide receiver, landing with a great offensive mind in Detroit. And so that's the like examples like that, because I think a lot of times what happens in dynasty in fantasy football in general is we'll look at the depth chart and we'll declare, well, we don't think that veteran is any good, and so we think the rookie can overtake him. But if it's a clueless coaching staff that's not going to put the rookie in any sort of position to succeed, if that rookie does overtake him and has an opportunity, is he going to flounder? Is he going to fail? And then if that happens, is the coaching staff going to go right back to that veteran that they do trust? And so I think that's instrumental. Those are great points.
Well, look, and interject. If y'all be so kind and allow me to interject here, sometimes the answer is because we get caught up on these models. This is one of the soapboxes I get up on sometimes when we start talking about this stuff. we have these models that want to throw all the players with a similar attribute in one bucket and then run some data and say, well, there's some X correlation. So that means, if you're a third day pick at wide receiver, you only have 7% chance of ever having a top 36 fantasy receiver season or something like that, right? So they're a bad investment. Don't invest in them, right? But the thing is, they're not all the same. There's it's not just apples and oranges. There's apples, oranges, kiwis, grapefruits, watermelons. Like you're putting it all in one bucket because they don't all get to be developed by the Rams or the Lions, right? And go ahead.
I was just saying, to piggyback off that, you can cook all of those fruits and prepare them a different way.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the raw materials when they're drafted. So don't tell me what third day draft picks have done. Tell me what third day draft picks that are drafted into good, like offensive organizations that were, producing in the top 10 efficiency like year after year. Tell me what those third day picks did, because that is going to give you the apples to apples comparison, where the buckets are too big. We're grouping together players that are too disparate when we're trying to make conclusions. And the other thing I'll say, since we're talking about Puka Nacua, this is the Dynasty show. That's awesome, by the way. I love that you guys are holding it down on the Dynasty channel. Look, this is a place where we hang out and talk Dynasty fantasy football, because this is like we're the sickos. I mean, we're the ones that we don't want to stop thinking about this stuff. We want to think about it all year, and this gives us an excuse to do that. Puka Nacua. Remember, this is important right now. We talked about this, the show I just did with Cecil, our show, the drum beats, the butterfly wings. So the first reports out of rookie minicamp, the first reports out of OTAs are often that precursor. They don't all turn out this way. But if you get the drop, because you were paying attention. And Puka Nacua, it was extremely consistent, the reports across different beat writers right away about Puka Nacua. Okay. So I didn't have Puka Nacua in my fantasy rookie draft plans in 2023, but I quickly moved him up to like a third round value once I heard that stuff, because it's the third round, whatever. I mean, we're just throwing darts really at that point. And I was just like, well, hey, there's some positivity coming out about this guy already, and we're wondering about Cooper Kupp. And again, we see what the Rams offense has done. I don't think we knew that Matthew Stafford was still had that great of football still left in him. But this is when you get the drop on everyone else in your dynasty league, by paying attention.
Yep.
I'm going to put you on the spot maybe here a minute. Jagger, you step in too, because we didn't have this question prepped, but we've had some OTAs, we've had some rookie camps. Is there any players that have stood out that are deep names that you've kind of heard drum beats about or buzz about? I'll start. I know our good friend Cecil Lammy has mentioned Blake Watson in the Broncos camp as being, and Cecil was really on Jaleel McLaughlin early last year too, but he's talked about Watson being a potential standout. And then he's also mentioned Troy Franklin, who we ranked very highly when we did the Football Guys rookie guide, obviously dropped to day 3. Opportunity stands to be there in the Broncos offense, but Cecil has talked about his route running, his work after the catch, and those were things that were not very cited very often when you looked at his profile, but when you watched the tape, that those stood out to me.
And see, Blake Watson is somebody where I care, but I don't care. Let's put it that way. Like Blake Watson, all right, if I have some fab, I will go out and I'll make moves. I'll pick him up, especially if C says so. But I'm not going to get excited about Blake Watson because I'm incredibly skeptical of Sean Payton. And this kind of, we keep same theme here. I really care about coaching staffs, and to me, Sean Payton reeks of delusion. And let's just say it. I'm not trying to, to quote Sig here, like let's take a walk down narrative street, but like let's be realistic, man. You had Drew Brees, who, as Jeff pointed out, was raised by Marty Schottenheimer and then gifted to Sean Payton. Then you have that for 15 years, and then you're on the couch for 5 years just running your mouth on air, and then you're gonna come in and then you're gonna be like, Russ Wilson, he's no good. Statistically, he's having the best season ever. He's garbage. Get him out of here. And then, it's just the way you handle that. And then, I don't know, man. It's just like Bo Nix is someone I really like. But I have 0 Bo Nix shares because I don't believe in Sean Payton at all. So that's where I am with the Blake Watsons. Whereas, as you brought up with the Puka Nacua, I'm like, wide open offense, Sean McVay, sign me up, baby. That's what, that's all I needed to hear for it. And I was like, let me blow my fab. It's burning a hole in my pocket.
Yeah, no, and look, I'd love it. I'd love it, Jagger, because I think that absolutely you are onto something. And what I've been citing is the Broncos with a short pause for the Peyton Manning resurrection that ended with a Super Bowl victory that Peyton Manning really had very little to do with, ironically. With the exception of that little mini era for the Broncos, okay, they were sucked into the spiral of failure of individuals, right? Josh McDaniels, right? Paxton Lynch, Russell Wilson, even Aaron Rodgers. Even though Rodgers was never on the team, he influenced them to hire Nathaniel Hackett, swirling, and now it's Sean Payton. Now you're sucked into the Sean Payton tornado of, like you said. I love that you're appealing to the psychology of the situation because, Sean Payton got paid. I mean, when you get hired by the Walmart heir, you get paid, and that's obviously what he was looking for. I think a lot of people jump to this conclusion, oh, he thinks he can fix Russell Wilson. He never wanted Russell Wilson, obviously. He never. Cecil said consistently, he did not trust Russell Wilson to run the offense. And yes, he trusts Bo Nix to run the offense. And when you're looking at Bo Nix, you understand why there'd be the love affair, like the hearts and the eyes, because there was this reports like everything in Bo Nix's backpack had to do with football. Great. He eats, drinks, sleeps football. And Sean Payton is like, well, I can mold you, you be a mini me. I mean, there are coaches in the NFL that want basically to be able to control the quarterback with a joystick. They want to be able to set up all the concepts. And, this is why very few saw Brock Purdy coming, because flourishing in the Kyle Shanahan system has a lot more to do with like understanding the why behind how he puts it all together. And if you can get there, then plus you have like Kittle and Samuel and Ayuk, then and McCaffrey and Trent Williams, all that offensive line. So, you have a perfect set of soldiers to go out there and do it. But that system is based on that. That's what Sean Payton wants. But the thing is, after the fact, we hear, and I think this checks, I don't think this is made up stuff, that the Broncos might have been the only team that had a first round grade on Bo Nix, because that's what they valued. They value the malleability of Bo Nix. And other teams that didn't care so much about that saw him as like a second day, potentially bottom half the NFL starter, backup type player. So that also does not give you confidence. But to go back to your topic, Jeff, a player that I'm paying closer attention to, and I have, I think, a full tier above most people, or at the top of his tier, is Jermaine Burton in Cincinnati. And look, I'll make it really simple before I pass it back to you all. T. Higgins ain't in the practices. Jermaine Burton's going to get to grow up fast if he's capable of it. Now, remember, this is a guy who, was not, his coaches were not exactly big fans of him as a person, apparently, if you believe what you hear. So I'm listening closely to see if he's generating the positive statements and see if he's taking first team reps in place of T. Higgins. How's that going? How's that looking? Because Burton could be a rocket ship this year.
Yep.
On that too, I think Andre Yeshivas, second year wide receiver, I think is also a deep dynasty stash that I really like out of that situation too. And in my mind, he profiles to fill maybe the Higgins role on the outside, whereas Burton kind of was drafted to be the replacement for Tyler Boyd, and really the ability to stretch the field too, without and as well as the ability to work after the catch. I think Burton offers those elements of the offense that they were really kind of lacking a little bit last year.
Yeah, and you nailed it of how I kind of have Burton projected, because again, guys, like if you understand the coaching staff and how they utilize their players, you could kind of slot these rookies in. I was like, oh wow, Jermaine Burton has elevated Tyler Boyd, like Tyler Boyd Baja Blast, Just like like he's a real savvy route runner, but he's explosive, so that kind of can shift those second targets to the slot and not so much just hammering it from X and moving Jamar Chase across the formation. And when they said Andre Yoshevich, the only reason why I don't have more Andre Yoshevich is because I drafted new Andre Yoshevich that I hope for. Just like, all right, get out of here, Andre. I need some Javon Baker. That's the only reason why I don't have him. But like last year, that's why he was a big stash for me, because I didn't we're kind of repeating. We're in that flat circle with T Higgins, where I'm like, I don't know if T Higgins is going to be around, and he's a big X receiver that can eat some press coverage and make some big plays. So it makes a lot of sense. And they got Joe Burrow. That's
Exactly.
Fantasy football is both nature versus nurture. All these players have their own nature, but if they don't have a mommy that loves them, they turn out pretty bad. So
Yeah, and I think that's one of the edges that you can grab in Dynasty is looking at those contracts, looking at before people start talking about it. And we were able to see last year, well, T Higgins might be a problem coming up, and so that you're able to grab Yoshevich, and then they go and draft. We knew kind of Tyler Boyd was going to be a free agent, so they go and draft Jermaine Burton. I mean, I think Drake London was a kind of a case of this. A lot of people thought that Desmond Ridder is going to be the quarterback. He's never going to do anything. I don't know what to do with him in Dynasty. And, now he's got Kirk Cousins. And so kind of reading those situations. But I want to go back to the big board here a little bit. And we had done a staff roundtable. Check it out on the site. We bring in the Dynasty staff, and Sig, you're gracious to contribute to that. And you talked about your willingness to move outside of that top tier. And I'm curious if you see that second tier as being stronger than in most years, and if that kind of lends to some of that willingness, or if it's again another situation. We've had a lot of these wide receivers landed in a guy like Xavier Worthy landing with Patrick Mahomes, obviously. Is that kind of opening up the willingness, and kind of where's your thoughts there?
Yeah. I think that in general, the draft enhanced the value of the rookies. And you mentioned Worthy. I think Worthy and McConkey both got really big boosts. I love the landing spots for the second tier running backs, basically the running backs that aren't Jonathan Brooks, that in their top 5. I think Trey, Benson, Blake Corum, MarShawn, Lloyd, and Jaylen Wright all landed in like ideal places. They landed in places that are ideal, at least for having offenses that embrace their skill set. And I know they're not going to square peg round hole these guys based on the offenses they landed in, but they all have looming opportunity, big opportunity. And I think that Wright in particular is potentially being slept on, because it ain't difficult, guys, to picture Wright influencing redraft leagues this year the way that Chan did last year. It's within the range of possibilities that Wright is like one of those potential, like maybe he's like Chan but stays healthy. If Chan doesn't stay healthy, and Raheem Mostert until recently wasn't exactly known for staying healthy, and Wright has that long speed, and his style is just hand in glove. They traded next year's third to get him. And I know that Kyle Shanahan has traded draft capital for draft picks at running back that has gone terribly. It's always his second favorite. Always take Kyle Shanahan's second favorite running back. And then the other thing I'd say, guys, is I think that I'm willing to trade down this year more than ever, because I feel like some of the better options in my eye, including Wright, are at the bottom of their tiers. So I feel like I can roll the dice that people aren't going to draft the way I would draft. So someone like Michael Penix will be there longer than he would be there. Like I would probably take him 5 picks before someone else. Burton's a good example, although maybe he's catching up. Even the third tier of running backs, Kamani Vidal, Tyron Tracy, Audric Estime, all great landing spots. Jagger, you mentioned Javon Baker, another guy. I think like I would personally take Javon Baker over Jalen Polk. I don't think most people are, but I know if I trade down, I can take advantage of that. So I think there's a large pool of players that I feel like I have ranked higher than the consensus. So if I trade down, I can harvest that extra value, where I might, if I stay at my pick, I might take them again 5, 6, 7 picks before anybody else would. That being said, this exercise rankings, it just represents my stab at it, and it's really just starting the conversation. And I think football guys audience, especially if you're a dynasty player, is really excellent at this. Like, you're all doing it your own way too, and you should. I mean, you're missing the fun of fantasy football if you're not doing it in some way that reflects your philosophy, your experiences, what you think matters in football or in life even. Like, we keep talking about the development and nurturing of players. This gets into like your life philosophy, and that all should be brought to bear when you're running your team.
Yeah, and the only reason why I don't have more Jaylen Wrights is because I'm trading up for MarShawn Lloyd's. Because like your strategy is the same as mine. Like once I'm in the back half of the first, I'm like, anybody want this pick? Give me any 2 seconds. Give me any 2 like
Yep.
that's where
Yep.
I'm kind of at. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm getting Ricky Pearsall. I'm getting Adonai Mitchell, Marshawn Lloyd, and I'm walking away happy because like, and again, guys, like the draft board matters in what round that you do that players are drafted in the NFL. But when we think about fantasy, it's buckets, man. And like right now, like the end of the first round and the first half of the second, basically to the 209, I think is one big bucket to me. And if I can get the maximum value out of that, you can. And like kind of Sig said, you're doing things your own way. Another reason why I don't have Jaylen Wright is I don't mean to get ahead of ourselves a little bit, but like we're going to talk about this player, Ben Sinnott. I like him a lot, so I'm trying to get him and get him around that range. So.
Yeah, I mean that's a natural segue there. So I've drew some heat. I had with Dylan put together. Dylan, gosh, why am I blanking on his last name? Help me out here.
McCarthy.
Our great
Mm-hmm.
McCarthy, yes, yep. Dylan McCarthy, our great works on the social media team, put together a graphic for me and released my top 24 rookies. And I did not have Benson on my list of top 24 rookies in Superflex, and people got very angry about that because they view him as the next Sam Laporta. Sig, I was kind of excited when I saw your tiers because you had kind of have him outside of your top 24 as well. I think that he's a player that he's gotten so much steam in Dynasty, and to me, the range of outcomes is massive because I think that when you look at his skill set, I mean, he could be Kyle Juszczyk and like be a very instrumental piece of that Commanders offense, but not be touching the football. He could also be a Chris Cooley type of throw it way back to in that history there where he's kind of that H-back that is very involved in that offense. And I think there's a wide range of outcomes when it comes to him. But you want to talk about where you've got him?
Yeah. And here's a moment to step back and say probably the number one fantasy football tip I've given over the course of my long illustrious career is know your scoring and lineups. 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 And what that stands for is grapple with the implications of, because your league starts 3 wide receivers, or your league has 2 flexes, or you have a tight end premium, or tackles are 1.5 points, or tackles are 2 points, or sacks are worth 4 points. You can easily look to even just at the thresholds. Well, how many points per game did a top 12 player at this position score, or top 16 or whatever? The math is pretty easy to do. And so these rankings are kind of elastic, where depending on your league, and also let's also apply like your roster. Not necessarily specifically drafting for needs, but come on. I mean, you have to be looking like a good franchise, like succession plans, like how much longer can you count on these players? So you should at least be weighing that in. And a player like Benson, I could see in tight end premium leagues as a late first round pick, because I think he is head and shoulders above the rest of the second tier of tight ends behind Brock Bowers. That being said, that doesn't mean you can address tight end. I also like taking Eric All maybe a round or 2 after Sinnott. I think, we talked about Cincinnati and how conducive that environment is for pass catchers. Eric All is talent-wise right there with Sinnott, who's a very physically gifted player. Eric All can't stay healthy. Eric All's the Iowa. Talk about Sam Laporta. He's the Sam Laporta. He's the Iowa tight end, right? So we'll see. So I think those are 2 good plans. But Sinnott, on the plus side, he's just in that Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, George Kittle, joyful warrior mold. Like when we think of the guys that have hit at tight end, a lot of them, what they have in common is like they're very athletic, but they play football with this old school gladiator mentality. And that's not. The thing out of Dane Brugler's Beast that really stuck with me was he started playing hockey when he was 3 years old. And JJ McCarthy is a good hockey player too. And he didn't start playing youth football until 4th grade, because up until that point it was flag football and you couldn't hit. You wanted to hit. You wanted to tackle. You wanted to be part of the scrapping. And so he was like, I'm not interested. As a 3-year-old, he was interested in hockey, but as like a 10-year-old, he's like, what, you mean I can't tackle that guy? No, I don't want to do that. So this is the mentality we want at the tight end position, but with athleticism and pass catching skills that can be unlocked. Now, the Vernon Davis kind of sits on the other side as a player that's so good at blocking that, or such a important that role. We never got to see what Vernon Davis could do over a prolonged period as a primary receiving tight end, even though, wow, it would have been spectacular. And by the way, rest in peace, Vontae Davis. And I think that Sinnott could hit big time, but Washington, yeah, Cliff Kingsbury.
Thank you. Like, I was about to say, I have a confession, guys. I own 0 Jayden Daniels. I own 0 Jayden Daniels, and it is nothing to do with the player, and more that I would rather trade back for Drake May and JJ McCarthy and get the value. Because, like, again, guys, I'm trying to buy seconds. So, like, like I have seen enough Cliff Kingsbury. I saw him go to OU and make that offense, or excuse me, I saw him go to USC and make that offense worse. Like he went there and everyone's like, well, why is Caleb Williams regressing? And I'm like, I wonder what the common denominator is now. And it's just like, I get the upside, the rushing, the fantasy production for redraft. So I'll probably have more. But for long term, I'm like, I like what Alex Van Pelt does for quarterbacks. I like what with KOC, Kevin O'Connell, I like what he does for quarterbacks. I hate Cliff Kingsbury. So I will bet on a player like Benson. And I was like, he'll probably be there. He'll be around. And that's why I'm no longer drafting him at the end of the second. Because, again, I like Jaylen Wright. I like MarShawn Lloyd. I like all these other running backs that I'm kind of trading up to get these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even wide receivers. So I'm kind of spinning those picks. And I'm like, you know what? Benson, you know what? I've seen Cliff Kingsbury. You're going to be my new Trey McBride. I'll go get you next year when you're a lot cheaper. When I'm buying you with
Yeah, that's a good point. I think 2 things I want to emphasize that you brought up, Jagger. One is, in general, with tight end, you can play it right. It's always the delayed impact. We're impatient about tight ends because at other positions, the players that matter hit earlier. And the players that matter will eventually hit. I mean, look at TJ Hawkinson. He had to change teams, but generally, if players can play, it's going to come out one way or the other. So in Dynasty, we shouldn't get too down long term based on destination, but we also understand that creates a buy window when a player isn't performing up to expectations. We just, like, if you're looking at tight ends, this happened with David Njoku, this happened with Evan Ingram. If you're wanting by year 2 or year 3, Sam Laporta spoiled us, but if you're wanting, and Trey McBride maybe even spoiled us, we're too impatient with tight ends. That's another reason to de-emphasize them in your rookie rankings, even in tight end premium. Although in tight end premium, people hold on to them a little bit tighter. But I want to piggyback what you brought up about Cliff Kingsbury, and I like the way, Jagger, that you're saying, I'm taking a stand, I'm stacking my rookie board this way because of my beliefs about like what happened with specific teams and eras happened. And if you're not a believer in Cliff Kingsbury, that should also affect how you view the whole Arizona Cardinals offense right now. Like, how much was Cliff holding them back? We could easily say, like, well, Matt Canada was holding the Steelers back. Okay. Urban Meyer was holding the Jags back. Like, we can look and see, but maybe Cliff Kingsbury is that limiting factor as you described, and we should be in on all the Arizona Cardinals this year.
Yep. You nailed it. Because there's people that still got, like, Kyler's got some stank to him, like, still, like, among the masses, the average Joes out there. He's like, well, he plays video games. I'm like, everyone plays video games, dude. Like these are people, and it's not that big of a deal. They're like, well, he didn't do much. And I'm like, he actually still was quite an effective fantasy asset, and that's despite them not having much scoring as far as like an NFL offense. And I was like, it's Cliff Kingsbury, man. Like he's like and I keep like, Jeff, this is gonna be my catchphrase on the show. Don't let bad coaches and bad players who are no longer there continue to influence your decisions. Like, like to me, Bill Belichick's gone. He's gone. And we got kind of a new thing over there. So I'm thinking differently. Cliff Kingsbury's gone. Arizona's Jonathan Gannon's team now. So and that's another reason why Kyle Pitts. We bring up depressed value. Kyle Pitts, yeah, his value has increased, but he's still attainable. People are still willing to sell him. So people still think that he's not very good. I saw someone say he made a high school catch the other day. I was like, oh, really? Like he had like a 50 it's vertical over an NFL cornerback, and you see kids doing that in high school. It's like, oh, for sure. Like I wish I was in your league to take him off your hands. And so you said it perfectly. Tight end is one that you should slow play. Like go buy the Eric Alls. I almost have 100% Eric All because I'm blowing fab on him because like I think injury is the only thing that is going to hold him back. I don't care about Mike Gesicki. I've watched 6 years of Mike Gesicki. I know who he is. I don't, like we're going to get excited. People are going to be like, well, maybe, and then we're going to get nothing. So I'm going to bet on Eric All for his price.
Yeah, my Jared Wiley is my guy that falls into that. And knowing like the delayed action on tight ends anyways and landing in the Kansas City offense that has so emphasized tight ends, I think that he profiles when Travis Kelce eventually does retire, that he profiles well to be that slot type tight end receiver, almost hybrid player, given his athleticism. And you can get it for free. You can get him for, and that's, that leads into one of the things that, and I think at a higher level, it's really interesting to do it on this show because we talk about tiers, but when you're kind of walking through just your rookie draft in general, you're going to have the elite of the elite, like the top 8, top 6, whatever it might be. And it's usually very hard to get into there. And you're thrilled if you end up with one of those picks. And especially if your team was good and you end up with one of those picks. Then you kind of have that middle section where it's maybe these players should be there, that late first, those high seconds. And I think it's hard to get into that tier as well because people either intrinsically view it as this is still a first round pick, or those early seconds. Most often in those leagues, your leagues are going to be held by bad teams that are saying, I need to add this rookie to my team. I don't want any points. I just want to add this rookie right now. But I think where the real meat and where we've spent a lot of time talking about is kind of that mid-second to early third. And I just love that group. And that's where I get really aggressive in my rookie drafts to try to trade into there, to try to use, to try to do two things, to get into there, to move those late thirds or fourths, which are really just kind of wild cards in my mind, to get into that tier, kind of cycle through maybe some of those young players that I was able to stash the year before that do have a little bit of hype to get somebody with a little bit stronger standing. But the other thing too is to create opportunities post-draft, because I think that you end up having a guy like a Jared Wiley or a guy like a Eric All who doesn't get drafted, who maybe could be a fourth in any scenarios. Or I know last year Puka Nacua wasn't drafted and he could have been a 30. I mean, he should have been a first-round pick, knowing what we know now. And so I think it's so important in your rookie drafts to create that extra roster space when you're in the rookie draft and not wait until post-draft to just drop players that off the end of your bench.
Yep. And I think it's one thing I've tried to coach myself and other people, the kind of tail end of the second, especially the third round and fourth round, I am trying to get players that I want. I no longer care about like anything anymore. I don't, I have, everyone's like, can I have 4 of your fourth round picks? I'm like, sure. I just want this. I only like 3 more guys. I do not care about this anymore. Or like, rest in peace. We kind of talked about him, Quentin Johnson, how I feel about him. I traded Quentin Johnston to get Javon Baker. I moved up 2 spots in the third to secure the bag. Because like in the way I kind of knew my league, like he was the last kind of good player on the board. And I don't think Quentin Johnston's a good player. And I don't think a new coaching staff is going to try to teach him how to play wide receiver on the fly. So like to me, that's kind of how you approach it. And then another one that I guess I'll kind of throw in here, Ray Davis. Like Ray Davis is someone that I'm aggressive about in the third round. I get guys that he's close to retirement, but I'll take those 2 years, or most importantly, I'll take his redraft value and I'll sell his redraft value in Dynasty. Like on competing teams, I may keep him that year. But in Dynasty, if I get a player that kind of pops and I know that he's not going to hold that value long term, cool, man. This third, fourth round, and in some cases, in some leagues, this fab pick, I've turned into a real second rounder. And then you guys remember Dameon Pierce? You know, like you were getting first rounders from him, and that's kind of how you should approach this game. Like the tier players that we're talking about now, with the exception of like probably Ben Sinnott and maybe Jared Wiley turns out into something. You're looking to sell these players. You're not building your roster around them unless they are Puka, but you don't want to chase these outliers.
I would be remiss if we did not talk about IDP on this show because we kind of let off going into it. One of my favorite players in the draft, and I'm going to go into Sig's beloved Steelers here. Payton Wilson, a linebacker, landed right towards the end of day 2. There were a lot of talks about his injury history. I'm really curious your thoughts on your Steelers defense, maybe a little bit IDP overall in this draft. I mean, we saw a big fade on, I think it was Dallas Turner was the first player off the board at around pick 15. So big fade overall on defensive players. If you think that will be a trend moving forward or if it's just a one-off, but also let's step into the Steelers a little bit, talk about Payton Wilson's potential and then Patrick Queen going in there as well, and maybe what you're seeing work out there.
Yes. This is a great moment to be a Pittsburgh sports fan. As a Western Pennsylvania born and bred Pittsburgh kid, Paul Skeens is going to pitch in, like, if you don't know, look it up. Paul Skeens. He's going to pitch in like 20 minutes. And the Steelers have some hope at quarterback. And now the figure that looms over this is Ryan Shazier. And I'm going to geek out and go super deep Steelers. You invited me to, Jeff. Okay, so it's a Steelers show for the next couple of minutes. Yeah, and I just did a show. It's going to come out, I think, on Rotoviz Radio with Thomas Emmerich, who I love, where we just get nostalgic about an old game. And it was the Steelers Colts 95 AFC Championship, an epic game, a truly one of the first. Yes, the Jim Harbaugh comes off way cooler and laid back because the NFL films was made maybe like within 5-10 years of the game. So Jim Harbaugh, I don't even know if he had coached Josh Johnson at the University of San Diego yet. I mean, he seemed like a real laid back dude when they were talking to him about this game and how it went. And the Steelers linebackers. And it wasn't just the outside linebackers. I mean, you think of the pinchers, you think of the edge rushers, the amazing duos. In this game, it was Greg Lloyd and Kevin Green, along the Jason Guild and James Harris and Clark Hagan's, rest in peace, Lamar Woodley. Now it's TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. That's like the defining thing about the Steelers defense. But it used to also be the inside linebackers, Kendrell Bell and Levon Kirkland. And eventually, down the line, Ryan Shazier. And since Ryan Shazier, inside linebacker has been just not a strength. And they've cycled through a lot of players, and nothing has really stuck. They moved up to get Devin Bush. That didn't work out. That was, a shank of draft capital. And this offseason, much like quarterback, maybe they figured it out. They set it straight. And not too much of a cost. I mean, Patrick Queen was like $13 million a year. I mean, that's Gabriel Davis money, best inside linebacker on the market. And then Wilson fell to the late third round. And Eric All is a name that's come up already multiple times on the show, as he should have. You have to understand draft capital is important. If you just used one thing to sort your rookie draft board, draft capital is a pretty good one. If you're only allowed one piece of data, just where did they go in the NFL draft? But contained within that one piece of data, you can bifurcate it out, and it can be like, well, what's the talent? Like Jermaine Burton's another good one. What's the talent? AD Mitchell also applies here. There are players that are being drugged down the board for reasons other than their ability to play football. Yeah. There are guys that, like, as a football player, he belongs in a higher tier in this draft, but because of off field, because of injuries. And in this case with Wilson, it is injuries. I think that's already been debunked that he doesn't have an ACL, but Hines Ward didn't have an ACL in one of his knees, so I don't care. But Payton Wilson's had a lot of injuries. Eric All's had a lot of injuries. Sometimes these players work out. Most of the time they don't. That's why they fall in the draft. But putting Queen and Wilson together also, can be like a multiplier for their value. because of how well both can blitz, how well both can cover. You're giving the defense a chance to have a lot of deception and put players in position to make big plays, put players in position, to make a lot of sacks from the linebacker position. So this is really exciting. And I think with Wilson as a Steelers fan, and as a fantasy football player too, if you can get 3-4 seasons out of Wilson, then kind of like Leighton Vander Esch, who had to retire because of neck issues that he had coming into the league. Yeah. Now he never really hit his seat as an NFL linebacker in terms of production and play, but you can see Jaylen Smith, another Cowboy. So I think that you'll take that reduced window of production if it is at a high level, and here's where it all comes together with know your scoring and lineups. In fantasy football on the IDP side, there's been a massive switch to true position. Gary Davenport, football guy staff, the Godfather, he's earned that nickname in the fantasy football world. He really helped get that going. And what that entails is breaking players out into edge and off-ball linebackers. So we're not going to skew things by having 3-4 outside linebackers and 4-3 defensive ends in the same in different pools of players, even though they're basically playing the same role. It created all kinds of, you try to exploit. I mean, look, know your scoring and lineup. So if there's a flaw in the scoring that you can exploit, then exploit it. And rookie drafts are one of the places you can do this. Rookie drafts are one of the places where sometimes you can see, like, wow, people just aren't looking at what defensive ends are worth in our system and things like that. But the pool at edge got a lot deeper, and the pool at off-ball linebacker got a lot shallower with this change. So scarcity makes you more tolerant of the Payton Wilson injury potential. Even a guy like Trevin Wallace, you're more tolerant of, well, he's got all the physical tools. He just has to learn the position. Ooh, but that sounds like a decision Carolina would make, right? Yeah, we just have to teach him how to play know what he sees and react validly. Oh, that's easy to teach at the professional level. Anyway, take a stand, and that for Payton Wilson, from a play measurables production standpoint, he's right there with Edgerrin Cooper as an early second round pick that we say, hey, this team is drafting him to be maybe a green dot player, certainly a signature player on defense at the off-ball linebacker position. If you're in the top 50 of the draft, it's like running back. If you're in the top 50 of the draft, you're ticketed to be a very important player in your unit. And I think even though Payton Wilson fell to the 98th pick, he's still going to be a very important player for the Steelers.
And one of the most important thing about Payton Wilson and his profile is his athleticism. Like he was one of the most athletic linebackers, and as a Freudian slip because he's going to be the quarterback of the defense. Everything works out. But what's really important for especially these off-ball linebackers and why they're devalued is, like, can you play pass coverage? And a lot of the old school linebackers just weren't athletic to keep up with tight ends or whatnot. So, like, this gives the Steelers a lot more flexibility with him and Patrick Queen. They can stay in the nickel if they want because they got two guys who could play sideline to sideline. They can implement 3-3-5 since they actually got pretty good defensive backs now. There's plenty of options and versatility. So, like, I don't get in. I've been trying to get into IDP for a while, but I don't know what it is. Every time I get in a league, it collapses before the draft even ends.
No. Get this man in a good IDP league. I want to make some phone calls, Jagger. I'm going to have my people talk to your people. And we're going to
Jagger joined. We have a real sicko league that Jagger did join this year. That we start drafting the day after the previous season ended, or really the moment that sleeper opens up, and we draft until the season starts, and we go the entire and we have about 200 spots on our roster, and we do best ball, and we just end up drafting. It is just pure sicko mode, and we do every single position that we possibly can. And so I was thrilled that Jagger did join that this year, but we do have IDPs in there. So
anything is extreme.
We make sure to do everything.
I recommend. I mean, again, if you're listening to my voice right now, you're watching the Dynasty show. Hopefully subscribe to the Dynasty channel. Subscribe to all 3 channels if you want. Give us a chance if you like it. Hang out with us. If you're listening to me right now, go more extreme with fantasy football. Like, whatever that means to you. Push it in an extreme. Push the envelope in whatever you like. Auctions, salary caps, positions, or anything. My favorite league, guys, is one where we start 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks. There's like two running backs, 3 wide receivers, 2 flexes. And then we start like 11 players on defense, and the scoring, like a top scoring defensive end or linebacker scores about the same as a top scoring running back or wide receiver. And what that means is throw positional value out the window. You just have to draft players you believe in. There's no games to play. You can't game the system about like, well, I'm going to make sure to wait on this position, because every position's worth about the same, and they all are. You have to dig deep to find players to start every single week, and it's nerve-wracking during the draft because you can't anticipate who's going to get picked between this pick and your next pick. But the extreme lineups and extreme scoring creates the window for that, and it's a blast. And I think if you're listening to the Football Guys Dynasty show, you're watching it right now, then you will probably enjoy more extreme fantasy football.
Yeah. That's why I told Alfredo, I'm like, we need to talk IDP here. It's like, we get the sickos, we get the degenerates, and they'll listen.
And if you've never done it, our about Matt Waldman before, and a good friend Matt has given me a really good insight of what he did, and I think I love it. He joined an IDP league, and he wasn't really sure on the IDP side, so he loaded up on the elite players on the IDP side and leaned on his knowledge base on the offensive side, figuring, well, I'm going to grab the elite guys over here, and then I can fill in the cracks with what I know. And I think that that's a great way to approach it if you've never done it before. Lean into maybe the depth of your strength of knowledge area and kind of peel back there and just grab the elite pieces on the other side.
Yeah, like get the
and
studs.
It's fun.
That, you know.
Yeah. Well, because it's fun. I mean, fantasy football is supposed to be fun. Like one of the core things that is great about fantasy football is you can share in the greatness of a player. You know, like when they're feeling the exhilaration of doing something great, you feel it too. And it's a wonderful thing. But limiting it to the offensive side, like I want to feel exhilaration when TJ Watt or Myles Garrett gets a sack, forced fumble, picks it up and takes it into the end zone. I want my team to win that week because of that, because I had TJ Watt on my team. The same way you might win because Tyreek Hill scored 2 touchdowns. And then the other side of it, you know, I'm always ready to make my pitch, evangelize about IDP football is, I mean, you can think about the process if you're a dynasty fantasy football player. Again, you make it your business to be thinking about football a lot, study it from a lot of different angles, et cetera, et cetera. So if you just apply that same process to the defensive side of the ball, when you watch football, it's so much more rich. You know, it's like a different, like the crayon box, you know, like it's 64 colors instead of 8. Or just it's 64 colors, like the whole picture's in 64 colors and not part of it in black and white, because you don't even understand the backstories of those players or the defensive coordinator and how changes have affected things, or even, and look, it will help you as an offensive fantasy football player too, because understanding matchups, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of defenses, understanding the kind of players that defenses shut down, the kind of players they have trouble with, understanding key injuries on the defensive side, and how, like, well, this week the run defense is probably their big run stuffers out this week, so this could be a good week for the opposing running back. It's going to make you better at fantasy football, but most of all, it's going to make you enjoy watching football even more.
Yep.
And that's what I'm huge on. Play every single style, because it all makes you, you might love Dynasty and you might only want to play Dynasty, but playing redraft gets you thinking about the waiver wire. Playing DFS gets you thinking about matchups and being willing to maybe play a player in a worse or in a better matchup over an elite player in a terrible matchup. And so just kind of changes your eye level, and it changes your mind and your thoughts about how you're building rosters and what you're putting into your starting lineup week to week. But I would be, since we're already there, we're already talking about all different sides of the ball. Special teams, there's a big change in special teams this year coming in with the kickoffs. And so growing up, like I remember guys like Brian Mitchell, who were an elite returner, but really had no other role on the team except for to be an elite returner. I think the NFL got away from those types of players when they're looking for more players that can kind of, the de-emphasis of the kicking game allowed them to just throw any random backup running back or wide receiver back there. I'm curious your thoughts, and we've already heard coaches and GMs talk about how roster construction is likely going to change now because of these rules. And so do you see, I know like Anthony Gold out of Oregon State is like that type of player that profiles as just a classic, just elite kick returner. You see those players coming back into the game now, and then kind of along with that, with the willingness for offenses to look different now, do you see those types of players getting roles in offenses now?
Yes. I'm sorry. Was that for me or Jagger? or both
For
of us,
you,
or
man.
whoever
Or
wants to
for
jump
anybody
in.
that wants to
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about it. We're all
You were
here.
talking
We're all
about
talking.
players I never heard of. Like that was definitely you were asking sick on that.
Well, okay, good. I'm going to bring up Lewis. Let's take a moment to talk about the non-rookie that you might take, or the player that was not drafted that you might take in your rookie draft. I think MFL has him listed with the rookies. Lewis Rees-Zammit, rugby player, good rugby player, like top 100 in the world, like one of the best rugby players in the world. He's only 22 or 23. I think that has been clocked at like 23, 24 miles an hour on the rugby field. He's the Chiefs. That should get your attention. The Chiefs signed him. And I already said they're making him a running back and a wide receiver. But obviously, this is a guy who's ready made for the new kickoff. And if you all aren't familiar with the new kickoff rules, Eric Galco, who runs the Shrine Game, I think he was part of the XFL, and I don't know if it was in the XFL or one of the other leagues where this was kind of tested or realized, and that's how it became proven, like a proof of concept that it can work. And what it's going to mean, bottom line, is that more kickoffs are going to be returned, which is, player safety. That's a whole other conversation, but it's an exciting play. It's a play that gives more players opportunity to influence the outcome of the game. And in your fantasy leagues, you may have noticed that the rules had been really de-emphasizing kickoff returns. If you get a point per 20 yards or something like that, hey, a player that plays some offense and is the primary kickoff returner, back in the day, that's a nice player. Even though you might not think of them as a force in fantasy football terms, depending on your rules, know your scoring and lineups, they might be. But the number of kickoffs returned was going down, down, down. It's going to go back up. So that's the most important thing. That's the headline. But under the headline is the way this is going to look, because it is kind of for player safety, because there's not going to be a lot of like running down the field, colliding into each other. The players are going to line up kind of like, and the thing that sucks about this is there's no more surprise onside kicks. As I was just reminiscing about the 95 Steelers and the Super Bowl that they lost, but the onside kick, the surprise onside kick, it's the point in the movie where the montage, and the underdog is like landing some punches. Drago is going into the corner as the Steelers do the surprise onside kick to turn the momentum in the Super Bowl. So we're not going to get that anymore. You're not going to get that anymore. But like an onside kick, you're going to have everybody lined up pretty close to each other, like within like 10, 15 yards of each other. So it's not going to be the speed returners. Notice I mentioned a rugby player to start this conversation. It's not going to be the speed returners. It's going to be the running backs. It's going to be the guys with the vision to read the developing creases and holes in this rugby scrum, for lack of a better way to put it, in front of them. And then if you can get free of that, it's not a second level. It's like a defense without a second level. Now you might see a lot more big plays on the kickoff return. And you're going to see players with that kickoff return skill. So it might not be the guys that run a 4-4. It's just the guys that are big and rugged enough. And it's like watch the third running back and fourth running back. Watch those kind of guys. Who makes the roster? And then the smaller implication, and this is, again, for the sickos, like the deep dynasty leagues. Yeah, I've been in a 32-team league. I've been in a league where lots of practice squad players are rostered in the dynasty league. So these kinds of guys may get more chances to make it and eventually show what they can do on offense because they have these kick return skills that are more important now.
Yep. Niles Paul was this too early?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
He was way too early.
The tight end wide receiver, but a rugged guy, a guy that is a rugged runner, but one that has some speed, enough speed if he can get free.
Yeah.
It's like that Seon Vaki that the Lions
who they
in the fourth round
listed him as a running back, and they listed him
/ running back,
and the Lions have listed him as a running back, specifically not safety / running back. So another important thing, if you're sickos like us, that happened this last week.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's an interesting one where when you look at how a roster constructed, and they're a really forward-thinking organization where they've got their top two running backs, and maybe Vaki is that third running back, but also he can be that kick returner, and they might play special teams, might even slide in on defense occasionally because he is that type of player. So, no, this has been fantastic. Sig, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything that you'd like to plug?
No, just the football guys, the channels, the YouTube audience has been outstanding. it's been a renaissance of our presence here, and the latest thing that y'all have done, and you've all been very kind. If you're still watching this far into the show and you want to help us out, subscribe to all 3 channels, or at least subscribe to this channel. So Cecil and I, then you got Dave and Alfredo, and it's all about the love. Football Guys is all about the love, and it's the love originates with everybody watching us. That's where the love starts, and that's always appreciated.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
thank you so much. You've been a voice for me for a long, long time, and I've gotten an opportunity to get to know you. And anytime I can do a show with you is an absolute pleasure. But thank you. Thank you too to the listeners and the viewers out there. It really means a lot to be able to work and build something here with the Dynasty channel at Football Guys. But for that, I'm Jeff Bell, and I'm going to let my co-host Jagger May take us out.
Yeah, again, thanks, Sig, and I'm Jagger May. Make sure that you guys like, subscribe, give us your opinion on all these players. I literally get paid to sit here and talk to you guys, so like I try to get in those comments and respond to all your Dynasty questions. And we'll see you guys on the next one.